Hello and welcome to Assessment Review with HRC Online. My name is Dan Wilbeck, a CIPD tutor for HRC Online, and today we'll be going through in detail the Level 3 3CO01, which is relating to business culture and change in context. So this is one of those units where it talks about the wider environment and then just HR, but still relating to business with a few elements of change here and there. But don't worry, we'll go through and we'll break it down step by step and move on from there. Okay, so let's crack on. Before we start, we always need to prepare, because if we fail to prepare, then we're preparing to fail. So at the start of your assignment, you are encouraged, as always, to plan your assessment with your assessor, whoever they may be. And where it's appropriate, you will agree those milestones so that you can monitor the progress throughout before you are ready to submit. You will have to refer to the indicative context in the unit in the guide and support your evidence. So what that means is using the hard referencing and having relative references to what you are talking about. We have other examples of how you can reference if you don't know how to, or you're not fully confident with that, or you can talk through that with your assessor. Also, pay attention to how your evidence is presented. So we're not using quotes all the way through. We are using our words and we are referencing what people are saying, but ensuring that we're referencing it correctly. And remember as well that you are in the people practice team. If you are not currently in a HR position at the moment, do not fret, do not worry, that's okay. Just put yourself in the mindset or in the shoes of somebody that's in HR. And as well, you need to ensure that the evidence is gathered for this assessment and it remains your own work. Like I said before, don't be using full quotes, just reimagine what people are saying and reinterpret how they are saying it, and you can put that into your own words, ensuring that you're referencing them correctly, so there is no plagiarism at all. Right, okay, let's talk about the task. So we have a series of 9 questions to look at in this scenario. So this unit is considering the wider impact of the external influences and how digital and commercial environment shapes business and culture within which they operate. So it considers the importance of people's behavior on organizational culture and its ability to manage change effectively. To become an effective people person or people practitioner, it's important to understand that the goals of the business, what the products and or services are, and that the organization is selling or providing, its main customers, any external factors that are influencing that, such as technology and the impact on the market and other working methods. We will touch upon that in a second as well, so please do not worry. But in terms of the situation, like I said, it's 9 questions long. It's 2,500 words you have in total. However, you do not need to hit exactly 2,500 words. With the CIPD word count, you have plus or minus 10%. So that's 250 words either side that you can play with. So if you are going over on your word or under, just ensure that it is within that 10% remit. Because there's 9 questions, that means there's approximately 280 words per question. So if you use that as your general guide, so you know you're talking too much or too little about a certain question, 280 words-ish or approximate is where you need to kind of base each question at. So with your responses though, they must be based on your own organization, where you work at the moment. If you're not in an organization, you're not working at the moment, again, do not worry. You just need to use an organization that you are familiar with or one that you can find research on that's publicly available. But ideally, we are looking for a company or an organization that you have worked for before, because you will know the ins and outs of this business so much more than you would if you weren't in that business. But like I said, do not worry if you do not have any work experience or you're not currently in an organization. You can use one that you are familiar with. And we use that phrasing quite a lot throughout the questions. One thing to remember as well is if you have an extensive career history, amazing. But however, the questions need to be the same organizations throughout all the 9 questions. So if you're talking about Joe Blogg's Pizza Place Limited, and that's where you work, you need to answer Joe Blogg's Pizza Limited in every one of your questions. So just make sure that you are referring to that and keeping that consistent throughout. Okay, let's crack on with the questions. And before we do that, each of the questions will have a bite-sized chunk that you can access. That is available for all HRC online members. However, you can access that as well through other methods. Just please contact us at HRC if you want to know more. Okay, questions 1 to 3. Let's crack in, let's go. You will notice at the end of each of these questions, it refers to AC and then a number. That is just relating to what number question or what specific question that we are relating to as per the CIPD guidance. So you will see that quite often, but it's just to ensure that you are using your headers in each of your assessments to say, I'm now answering AC 1.1 or AC 1.3, etc., etc. Okay, so examine 2 key external influences impacting or likely to impact activities of the organization that you work for, or as we've mentioned many times, or an organization which you are familiar with. That's question number 1. Number 2, discuss the main business goals of the organization that you work for, or again, an organization which you are familiar, and why it's important for the organization to plan how they achieve their goals. Next, we have discuss the products and or services of the organization that you work for, and again, or an organization that you're familiar with, and discuss the organization's main customers. Okay, I've just read those questions to you, but let's do something a little bit more special and we'll break them down so we are addressing the verb. Addressing the verb is something that you will need to do during every question to ensure that you are answering the verb that is mentioned in the question. So for example, question number 1 here, I've highlighted examine. Examine is the verb here. So this is what you need to kind of also interrogate, investigate. You need to go into greater detail on when you're examining. So always look at the verb first, and then this is what you need to do, or this is where you need to base your questions from, so you know kind of what mode that you are going into to answer the question. Right, so after the word examine, it says to. So that is another key area there that you need to look at. So 2 external influences that are impacting or likely to impact the activities of the organization. So there's multiple things that you can do there. You can start by considering a range of important external factors that will or could impact the organization's activities. What that means to you and your organization is to you and your organization. So this is why we ask you to have an organization that you are familiar with or have worked for before, because you know exactly, or you may not know exactly, and that requires a bit of research, and that's okay, to go in and have a look at these external influences. You may want to use a tool in order to break down what is seen as an external influence. So for example, you might want to use a pestle analysis. If you don't know what a pestle analysis is, obviously you can have a quick search and research for that, but it stands for political, economic, social, technological, logical, and environmental. So they're the type of different factors that are influential to organizations. So that's what you can look at. But what we're not asking for you is to do the whole of the pestle. Just because you can use the pestle tool, you can pick out the P for the political side, you can look at the technological side or the environmental side, but you only need to use 2 in your answer. So please make sure it's just 2. And the answer also needs to be clear on which organization the answer is for as well. So ensure that your answer is focused on the organization. Make sure that you are naming your organization as well. Like I said before, let's use Joe Blogg's Pizza Limited. Joe Blogg's Pizza Limited is they're facing technological demands because of X. And this is what you can, how you can start that basis, and you can name your company and talk about your influence. Okay, next, discuss. So we're now needing to discuss the main business goal. So you're looking at business goals here and why it's important for the organization to plan and how they will do that to achieve that goal. So it's always going back to the goal. So first off, you talk about the main business goal. You do not need to write about any secondary or tertiary business goals that may exist or departmental goals. We're talking about the overall holistic business goal. Discuss why it's important for the organization to plan and how they will achieve that. So you are looking into more detail of why it is important for that specific organization. So for Joe Bloggs Pizza Limited, it may not be important to look at, of course, all influencers are important, but from that standpoint, it may not be important to look at the political side, whereas I work for Manufacturing Limited 123, and they want to look at the political side because of the changes and the impacts that are driving their goals in order to hit targets, etc. So you need to make sure that what you are talking about is important for the organization that you're in. And it also just makes it easier to discuss that. Research may be needed as well if you don't know what your business goals are. It may be that you are need to speak to leaders. You need to do a little bit of research. It may be on company websites, that sort of thing. But ensure that you know what the business goal is before you start talking about that. So that's where that research requires. Okay, question number 3. Again, we're having another discussion, but this time it's about products or services. And who are our main customers. So this is broken down into 2 sections. So first, we're discussing the product and or services. We say and or services because you may be a company that is providing a service as well as products. So if it's one or the other or both, you need to discuss and talk about that. The reality of the business is taken into consideration here. So like I say, it might just be a service provider or a product provider. Whatever your organization is, then follow through with that, talk and discuss. Okay, take care not to copy and paste from your organization's website. I know I mentioned before about you checking on organizational websites, but just make sure that you aren't copy and pasting word for word. You need to reinterpret what is being said to an academic level. So you're not getting caught in any plagiarism that may occur. The next point there is the discussion of the main customers, consumers. It may be that it is the general population that are your consumers or your customers. It may be that it's a business-to-business transaction that it's done. So, for example, in Manufacturing Limited 123, we provide the parts that build the cars that you're driving, but that we're not providing that to the customers, we're providing that to the companies that are building the cars. So then in that case, we'll be business to business. It may consider that it's one-time purchase. It could be a subscription, or it could be that repeat customers with loyalty is important in your organization, and that's where you need to talk about that. You focus on external customers, not internal here. So the external customers of the product or services and stay focused on them. You do not need to talk about anything outside of that. Again, there's no requirement to evidence the use of references to wider reading to achieve a high pass in AC 1.3. We say that it's not required. However, it could be something that you think you're talking about a really good point here, and to substantiate your argument, you want to say, and Smith 2024 agrees with me, and here's why. So you may want to use a reference even though it's not required. Okay, question 4. I've broken this down onto its own because now we're talking about technology has transformed workplaces and the people profession. Okay, great statement. So the question here is review how file sharing technology and video conferencing can be used to improve practices and collaboration with the people profession in your organization, or again, an organization that you're familiar with. But now let's break that down, that question, to see what we're actually focusing on. So technology, bam, that's what we're looking at. The rest of the statement is great, but it doesn't add any more context to what we need to review, which is the verb in this question. We're looking at file sharing technology and video conferencing and how it can be used to improve working practices and collaboration. So there's the key points that we're pulling out here. So first of all, we want to review. So a review is having both sides of an argument looked at. So is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad in order to use this? Not good and bad, more the pros and cons. So we review how file sharing and video conferencing can be used by people professionals in the chosen organization rather than write about their use elsewhere in the organization. So we're talking specifically about HR here. So you've got a marketing department or a sales department or a finance department. We're not talking about why file sharing technology or video conferencing is great for them. We're talking about HR and the people profession. So make sure that you are focusing solely on that video conferencing and file sharing technology. If it's not focused on the people professionals, then it may not achieve a pass in this instance. So it may be easy to go off onto a tangent, but make sure that you are being clear and concise with what you are putting in there. Okay, next we've got questions 5 to 6. So in 2003, a CIPD podcast asked the following question: has remote working killed organizational culture? This topic of interest in many organizations, but considering the impact of remote working on culture, is important to understand what is meant by the term organizational culture. Now, deep breath, that's a big statement. So the questions are: define organizational culture and explain why is it important to foster an appropriate and effective workplace culture in your organization, or again, an organization that you're familiar with. The next one after that is explain how culture is part of a whole system and explain how people professionals work and actions that could impact elsewhere in your organization, or again, one that you are familiar with. But we're not going to leave you all high and dry there. We are going to break that down again once more. So we're going to cut out the areas that we don't need to look at in that big bold statement and just the key points. And the key point there is the quote: has remote working killed organizational culture? Why is CIPD talking about that? Have a look, integrate that into your answer. You want to look at the impact of remote working on culture, if any, either side, pros and cons, and then the term organizational culture. If this is a brand new term that's been brought up to you, again, have a look at research. There may be some CIPD fact sheets that talk about organizational culture directly. Okay, so for the first question here, which is question number 5, you want to define organizational culture and explain why it's important and it's appropriate for effective workplace culture. So you're defining essentially what culture is. Like I said, CIPD fact sheet is a great place to start. This part of the answer could be supported by recognized definitions as well, such as you find an article that says Smith 2023 believes that culture may be this, whereas Smith 2025 may say this instead. So you're having multiple definitions. I would probably, with the word count, maybe use 1 or 2 maximum. And then you get moving on to explaining why it is important to foster an appropriate and effective workplace culture in your organization. You might be in an organization where there's 3 people. That's cool. That's okay. That's great. You might have a different dynamic and a culture to a company that has 300 or 3,000 employees. Why is it important to ensure that there's culture on both sides of those scales? And you're talking about your culture in your organization, remember. Next, we want to explain a whole system and explain again the actions for impact. Okay, so we're breaking this down and check that both parts are addressed in this question. If both parts aren't addressed in this question, then it's likely not to pass. When explaining how culture is part of a whole system, reference could be made to models that exist at the moment. So frameworks that you may or may not be aware of, you may require further research, such as McKinsey's 7 or Galbraith's STAR model, or even Burke-Lipwin's model. So you have a look at those models as a great place to start for you. Once it's established the organizations are a whole system, great, we are a whole system. Now what? An explanation of how people professionals work and how actions could impact elsewhere in the organization then can be added. So you add on slowly into and integrate it into your organization and bring it back to what the question is, and then bring back in your organization. And that's how you weave your answer. So it has a narrative for nice readability. And then we want to develop and understand the knowledge of this subject. You could explore organizational design theory, maybe. There is a CIPD fact sheet on organizational design, which is a great place to start as well if you are feeling lost with this question. But do not fret. Once you break it down into these nice, easy steps, or use our HRC online bite size, then we'll help you with the questions in a lot more detail. Okay, almost at the home stretch. We are questions 7 till 9. According to the CIPD's change management fact sheet, one driver of organizational change is economic downturn and challenging trading conditions. So the questions here, 3.1, which is question 7. Explain why is it important that organizational change driven by economic downturn and challenging trading conditions is planned and effectively managed in your organization or organization that you are familiar with. Again, it's that wording once again and throughout all 3 of these questions. Question 8 is explain the importance and role that could be played by people professionals in your organization or one that you're familiar with within change driven by economic downturn. And then the last question for this unit is discuss how organizational change driven by economic downturn could impact people in your organization or one that you're familiar with in different ways. Okay, let's break that down as we do best. Okay, so we're cutting out that first part because we're looking at solely the driver of organizational change and economic downturn and challenging trading conditions. They're the key points that we want to pull out. In those 3 questions, so we'll questions 7, 8, and 9. So all these questions present on the screen now are related to change-driven and economic downturn and challenging trading conditions, as it mentions in that first paragraph. So each question should be addressed separately. You may want to combine and merge these questions together, but please do not. If it's not apparent in your organization, so economic downturn is not a thing at the moment or something you've never considered, or even trading conditions and you've never had those challenges or you've never experienced those challenges, to your knowledge, you can still address the question from a hypothetical standpoint. So if we were to go through a recession, there may be economic downturn. So I'm putting my mind and putting my feet in the shoes of that situation. Right, we're going for a recession. What is the potential? It may be that you want to look at the CIPD fact sheets again. It may be that you want to look at articles. It may be that you want to look at videos and look at news that happened at that time in order to picture yourself and what people were talking about for you to understand fully what economic downturn and challenging trading conditions are. This is just your background research that you may not want to use in your answer, but it's just something to add to the context so that you can fully understand. So with question 3.1, which is number 7, you want to firstly explain why it's important the change is planned and managed effectively in these circumstances. And then you could consider organizational and individual impacts. So for example, you may be working in the HR department and you may be safe in, let's say, in inverted commas, about your job security, for example, because you're the one going through the processes. But however, somebody in finance may be impacted a lot more than your department or individually, because it may affect what's happening externally, but we'll talk about that more in a second. The next point, which is question number 8, rather than an explanation of the importance, as it highlights there, and role in any change situation, knowledge should be applied to change driven by economic downturn specifically. So remember to explain the importance and role within the context of your chosen organization. It may be the case that HR aren't apparent, that there could be external consultants that are coming in to help and assist with that change driven from economical downturn. It may be that you're talking about things that have happened in the past before, prior to you working at that company. And again, that's fine. And then the last question that we have here is 3.3. So now the focus is moving back onto a discussion rather than an explanation. Specifically, organizational change and economic downturn again, and how this could impact people in your organization. So the focus is now on the employees, and the attention is now turned to the people who work in your chosen organization and how they could be impacted by the change. Because we're going to be mentioning people, or again, departments. So Jane that works in finance, or Susie that works in sales, you're not going to be mentioning them specifically, or you could, the way that you do that is you move around that question and just mention our sales assistant, our finance administrator may feel this pinch because X, Y, Z. You could consider the positives as well as the negative impacts. Whenever we talk about impacts, people always go straight to the negative, but you may want to flip that and look at the positive side. So for example, if your company is having a series of change because of the downturn, that could mean a restructure. And that could mean more job security for one roles versus the other. But have a look at that and how that may play, and talk about positives as well as negatives. You want to talk about the content provides many good ideas that can be discussed. So not able to include all examples due to given the word count, you may want to talk about everything that could happen under the kitchen sink in terms of change. Because of our 280 words, you won't be able to talk about everything. You may want to talk about 2 key points, 3 key points, depending on how you talk about that concisely, and how it appropriates to your organization as well. So that could be downgrades, upgrades, regrades, customer perceptions, relationship shifts, career aspirations, mental and physical health, self-esteem, imposter syndrome. We've talked about job security and restructuring. There's so much that can happen through change. If you look at one of those areas, again, look through the CIPD fact sheet is a great start about change, and then you can weave your conversation or your discussion based on what's happened in your organization. We're discussing each reason. Give references to support what you are saying. So if change could lead to job loss, then you need to explain why it could lead to job loss. So for example, you could read an article to say that because we are going through furlough again, that it's going to relate to job losses because we cannot operate as a business and have to rely on the government. So therefore, that's why a job loss is substantiated there. That may not be entirely true, but you now need to look at something to support that argument. So that's all of the questions. So, as we've mentioned throughout, bite size. So this is something that is available to everybody that's enrolled on HRC Online, where we break down the verb in a lot more detail than we have done here in this overview. We provide some references for you to have a starting point. I know the CIPD fact sheets are always there as a great start. However, further referencing and research shows great academic rigor. So make sure that you are using more references than are just provided in these videos, bite-sized videos, to show that you are further studying. And it just helps support your answers in greater detail as well. So like I said, it's a great starting point having these bite-sized sessions. We even give you fictitious scenarios in order to help you answer the question, because everybody that will go through these courses will be on different roles, different organizations, different industries, and everything will impact them differently. We can't tell you how to answer this question, but we can give you a fictitious scenario or how it may play out in that scenario, which helps you understand the question in greater detail or beyond just looking at the question and breaking it down, looking at the verb or the key points. So it's a great place to start. If you haven't referred to there before, please do. And if you do have any questions about bite size, please contact HRC Online and we'll be able to answer more for you. So that brings us to the end of the assessment review for 3CO01, which was relating to business culture and change in context. I've been Dan Wilbeck, the CIPD tutor for HRC Online, and hopefully we'll see you again for another assessment review. Thank you.